I caught my boyfriend's double life at a hotel with her.
I never thought of myself as someone who would end up writing a story like this. For most of my life, I believed cheating was something that happened to other people, the kind of betrayal you read about in tabloids or overhear in hushed conversations at dinner parties. But me? I was careful. I was loyal. I built my relationship on trust because I believed it was the only way two people could survive the chaos of life together. I met Ethan during what I can only describe as the loneliest chapter of my life. My mom had just passed away after a long battle with cancer, and I was drifting, numb and hollow through my days. He was a coworker at the marketing firm where I'd just started. Tall, charming in that slightly awkward way that felt genuine, and with this soft laugh that somehow pierced through the fog I lived in. He noticed me when I felt invisible to the world, and that mattered more than I can explain. Our first real conversation happened in the office kitchen. I was fighting back tears while making a cup of tea, and he asked if I was okay. I brushed him off, but he didn't leave. Instead, he leaned against the counter and started talking about the dumbest thing, how he once broke his coffee machine because he thought he could fix the filter with duct tape. I remember laughing, this sudden, startled laugh that felt like a release valve opening in my chest. That laugh was the beginning. He asked me out 2 weeks later, a casual, wanna grab dinner after work? And I said yes, without hesitation. That night stretched into many more. We shared secrets over late-night ramen bowls, told stories about our families, our dreams, and our scars. He listened in a way that made me feel like my words had weight. And when he held my hand across the table, I felt anchored for the first time in months. The relationship built itself in layers. We spent weekends exploring little diners and bookstores around the city. He left notes on my desk, silly doodles or inside jokes. When my grief threatened to drown me, he pulled me out with patience and humor. He met my dad and sister within 3 months, and they adored him. My dad even pulled me aside and whispered, "Don't let this one go." For a while, everything felt like a dream. We moved in together after a year, probably too soon if I'm honest, but it felt right. Our apartment was small, messy, filled with mismatched furniture, but it was ours. We built routines, him making breakfast, me staying up late to prep for presentations. We bickered over laundry and rent, but it was the kind of bickering that still ended in laughter and kisses. I believed we were building something real, something lasting. I let myself trust him completely, because why wouldn't I? He gave me no reason not to. Every gesture, every promise, every moment seemed to reaffirm that I had finally found my person. But here's the thing about trust. It doesn't shatter in one clean break. It frays slowly, unraveling thread by thread until one day you're staring at the pieces of something you thought was unbreakable. Looking back, I can pinpoint the first loose thread. It was a night when Ethan came home late from work. He said there was an emergency project, and I believed him. But he smelled faintly of perfume, not mine. I laughed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. After all, I'd worn my mom's perfume earlier that week, so maybe it lingered in the car. Maybe someone in the office hugged him. There was 100 rational explanations. I wanted to believe the best in him. I needed to. So I ignored it. I told myself love was about trust, not suspicion. I clung to that belief even as little cracks began to form, even as his phone started buzzing late at night with messages he brushed off as work. At the time, I didn't realize I was standing at the edge of the cliff. The cracks were small at first, easy to plaster over with excuses. Ethan started working late more often. At first it was once or twice a week, then it became almost every other night. He'd come home tired, distracted, sometimes irritable. When I asked how his day went, he gave me vague answers. Busy, stressful, you know how it is. And I did know how it was. Our company was demanding, deadlines always looming, but still, something felt off. I brushed it aside because everything else seemed normal. He still made me coffee in the mornings, still kissed me on the forehead when I left for work. We still watched our shows together on weekends, still laughed until our stomachs hurt over some dumb meme. Those moments grounded me, convinced me I was imagining things. But then there were the little changes. He started guarding his phone like it was a state secret. Before, he'd leave it lying around, unlocked, buzzing with notifications neither of us paid attention to. Now, it was always face down on the counter or shoved into his pocket. He added a passcode, which I pretended not to notice. One night, I heard the faint hum of his voice from the living room. I got up, half asleep, and found him whispering on the phone. When he saw me, he jumped like a guilty teenager and mumbled something about a colleague who needed help with a report. At 2 in the morning, it didn't add up, but I nodded and went back to bed, telling myself not to make a scene. I didn't want to be the crazy girlfriend, the one who snoops through texts and accuses without proof. My mom used to tell me that love without trust is just fear dressed up as commitment. I clung to that advice like scripture. But doubt is a parasite. Once it finds a way in, it grows, gnaws, and twists every little thing into evidence. The turning point came on a Saturday afternoon. We'd planned to spend the day together, grab brunch, maybe walk through the park, but right before we were about to leave, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his whole expression shifted, like he'd just been caught in a lie, even though I hadn't said a word. He said, "I'm so sorry, babe. Something came up at work. I'll make it up to you." I forced a smile, but my stomach churned. When the door clicked shut behind him, I sat there, staring at the wall, replaying his expression over and over. Something came up at work. On a Saturday? I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to so badly, but my gut screamed otherwise. That night, when he finally stumbled back in around midnight, I decided to test him. I asked casually, "So what did you end up working on?" He hesitated just for a second before launching into some convoluted explanation about client reports and system errors. The problem was, I worked at the same company. I knew no client was demanding reports at midnight on a Saturday. His story was so flimsy, it practically collapsed under its own weight. Still, I said nothing. I nodded, smiled, kissed him, and let him think I believed. But inside, something shifted. The trust that once felt unshakable now wavered like glass under pressure. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more inconsistencies. He claimed to be at the office, but when I casually texted a coworker, they mentioned he'd left hours earlier. His clothes sometimes smelled faintly of perfume again. Sweet, floral, not the kind I wore. And then there were the absences I couldn't explain away. Nights he didn't come home until after midnight. Mornings he left the apartment before dawn, claiming early meetings no one else seemed to know about. I told myself maybe I was overthinking. Maybe grief had left me insecure. Maybe I was projecting fears that weren't real. But deep down, I knew. Something was wrong. And once you suspect betrayal, it's like living with a ghost. Every laugh sounds hollow, every touch feels staged. I started studying him the way a detective studies suspects, searching for cracks, tells, anything to confirm what my heart already whispered. I didn't know it then, but the storm was already gathering, and soon it would rip everything apart. The first undeniable red flag came on a Wednesday evening. I had stayed late at work, buried under a mountain of presentations, and decided to surprise Ethan with takeout from his favorite Thai place. He had told me he'd be home working on something urgent, so I figured it would cheer him up. When I pulled into our building's parking lot, I noticed a car I didn't recognize parked near his spot. A sleek, silver sedan, spotless, with a dangling charm on the mirror. I didn't think much of it until I saw Ethan stepping out of it. He wasn't alone. A woman sat in the driver's seat, laughing at something he'd said. He leaned in through the window, close enough that their faces almost touched, and then patted her hand before shutting the door. My heart pounded so hard I thought I might faint right there in the car. I ducked down, terrified he'd see me, clutching the takeout bags like they were lifelines. I waited until he disappeared inside before forcing myself to breathe again. Rational explanations fought for space in my head. Maybe she was a coworker giving him a ride. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe. But the laughter I'd seen, the way he touched her hand, it wasn't nothing. That night, when I walked in holding the food, he was already sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He smiled at me like everything was normal, kissed my cheek, and thanked me for dinner. He didn't mention the car, he didn't mention the woman, and I didn't bring it up. Not yet. But from that moment on, I couldn't shake the image. It replayed in my mind on loop, taunting me. A few days later, I decided to test the waters. I casually asked, "So, did you get home okay the other night? Parking seemed full." He looked at me blankly for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, no issues. Why?" That was it. No mention of the silver car, no mention of the woman. Just a smooth, practiced lie. My stomach twisted. I started paying closer attention after that. I noticed he always left the apartment with his phone in his pocket now, even when he just went to take the trash out. He started taking showers immediately after coming home, which he never used to do. And sometimes he'd disappear into the bedroom for calls, closing the door behind him. I was unraveling inside. Half of me wanted to burst in, scream, demand the truth. The other half wanted to cling to ignorance, because as long as I didn't know for sure, we could still be okay. But fate has a cruel way of forcing your hand. One night, I was folding laundry while Ethan showered. His phone buzzed on the dresser, lighting up with a notification. Normally, I'd ignore it, but this time, curiosity got the better of me. I glanced over, and my blood ran cold. The preview read, "Can't stop thinking about last night. When can I see you again?" My hands shook so badly I dropped the shirt I was holding. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it was spam. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe. But the shower turned off. Panic surged through me. I didn't dare open the message. I shoved the phone back exactly where it had been and forced myself to keep folding clothes, my heart hammering in my chest. When Ethan came out, towel around his waist, he kissed the top of my head casually, completely unaware that my world had just shifted. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the message in my mind. Can't stop thinking about last night. There it was, the confirmation I'd been dreading. Once the seed of doubt takes root, it consumes everything. I became hyper-aware, analyzing Ethan's every word, every gesture. But I also knew suspicion alone wasn't enough. I needed proof. Proof so undeniable that even he couldn't twist it into a lie. I started small. I paid attention to his schedule. When he said he was working late, I checked his location on Find My Friends. At first, he really was at the office, which made me question myself all over again. But then came the nights when his location was conveniently unavailable. The first time it happened, he claimed his battery had died. The second time, he said he left his phone in the car while he was inside helping a colleague. By the third time, I didn't even ask. The excuses were too neat, too rehearsed. Then I noticed the receipts. Crumpled slips from restaurants we never visited together, tucked into his jeans pockets or left in his car. Once, I found a bill from a wine bar downtown, time-stamped at 11:43 p.m., a night he swore he had been at the office working on quarterly reports. I remember staring at that little piece of paper like it was a weapon, my hands trembling as I slipped it into my purse. Still, I told no one, not my sister, not my friends. Saying it out loud would make it real, and I wasn't ready for that. The real breakthrough came by accident. One evening, Ethan left his laptop open on the couch while he went to take a call. Normally, he was careful, paranoid even. But that night, maybe he got sloppy. Maybe he thought I was too naive to ever look. My eyes flicked to the screen. An email tab was open. The subject line glared at me. Our getaway this weekend. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My hands moved before my brain could stop them. I clicked. The email was from someone named Clara. The words seared into me. I can't wait to have you all to myself. Last weekend was incredible. I still feel your lips on my skin. Don't worry, I booked the hotel under my name. Just like we said, nobody will ever know. My vision blurred with tears. My chest felt like it was being crushed. But even through the shaking, I copied the email word for word onto my phone. Proof. When Ethan came back into the room, I was sitting there, smiling, pretending to scroll through Instagram. He had no idea I had just uncovered his secret life. I wish I could say I confronted him right then, demanded answers, screamed until the walls shook, but I didn't. Not yet. Because as much as it destroyed me, a tiny, pathetic part of me wanted more. I needed to know how long, how deep, how far this betrayal went. So I played along. I kissed him goodnight, let him hold me, even as my mind screamed. The next morning, I called in sick to work. While Ethan left for his early meeting, I followed him. My heart pounded with every turn of the wheel, palms sweaty against the steering wheel. I felt like a character in some cheap drama, except this was my life unraveling in real time. He didn't go to the office. He didn't even come close. Instead, he drove downtown and parked outside a boutique cafe. 10 minutes later, the silver sedan pulled up, the same one I'd seen before, and out stepped Clara. She was gorgeous, effortlessly beautiful in a way that made me feel small and ordinary. Long dark hair, a smile that lit up her whole face. When she saw Ethan, her whole body seemed to glow. He hugged her, kissed her cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world, and together they walked inside. I sat in my car across the street, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat, but I couldn't look away. There it was, the undeniable truth. Ethan was cheating on me. And the worst part? He looked happy. Happier than I'd seen him with me in months. That image burned into me, searing itself into a scar I'll never carry. I drove home in a daze, tears blurring the road. By the time I stumbled into our apartment, I knew two things. I had the proof I needed, and my relationship was a lie. But the confrontation, that would come later. And it would change everything.
The days after seeing Ethan with Clara were some of the hardest of my life. I felt like I was living in two parallel worlds. In one, I played the role of the devoted girlfriend, smiling, cooking dinner, asking about his day. In the other, I was a detective, secretly piecing together a puzzle of betrayal. I couldn't stop myself. Every time his phone buzzed, my stomach flipped. I started keeping a mental log of his comings and goings, comparing them against the scraps and evidence I collected. Receipts, emails, lies he didn't even bother making consistent. The more I uncovered, the more it became obvious. This wasn't some fling. This was a full-blown affair. And I wasn't just losing him to anyone. I was losing him to someone who seemed to have taken the best version of him. With Clara, he was attentive, thoughtful, passionate. With me, he had become distant, distracted, absent. I found myself staring at him sometimes, wondering if I ever really knew him at all. How could the same man who held me through nights of grief also be sneaking around behind my back, building memories with someone else? The rage and heartbreak were constant companions, swirling together until I didn't know which consumed me more. But through it all, I kept my mask on, because I wanted the confrontation to be on my terms. And then, fate handed me the perfect opportunity. One Friday evening, Ethan announced that he had to go on a quirk trip for the weekend. He said it so casually, tossing clothes into a bag, humming to himself like he was heading out for a vacation. My gut twisted, because I knew exactly where he was really going. So I made a plan. The next morning, after he left, I called my friend Jenna, the one person I trusted completely. I broke down over the phone, sobbing out everything I had uncovered. She listened, silent but steady, and then said, "Do you want me to come with you?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Yes, please. Together, we drove to the address I'd copied from Clara's email confirmation, a small boutique hotel tucked away on the edge of the city. My hands trembled as I clutched the steering wheel, Jenna's reassuring squeeze on my shoulder the only thing keeping me from breaking down. We parked across the street and waited. My heart hammered with every passing car, every opening door, and then there they were, Ethan and Clara, walking out of the hotel together, laughing, their fingers intertwined like a couple on vacation. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Jenna gasped softly beside me, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The sight was both everything I feared and more than I could have ever imagined. They weren't just sneaking around for sex, they were in love. Something inside me snapped. Before I knew it, I was out of the car, storming across the street. Ethan's smile froze when he saw me, his hand slipping from Clara's like it had been burned. You're not supposed to be here, he stammered, his face draining of color. No, I said, my voice shaking with rage, but clearly neither are you. Clara looked between us, confused, until realization dawned. She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up my hand. Don't. Just don't. Ethan reached for me, panic in his eyes. Babe, please, I can explain. Explain what? I snapped, my voice breaking. That you've been lying to me for months? That every late night, every fake excuse was just so you could play house with her? He flinched like I had slapped him, but I didn't stop. The words poured out of me, raw and jagged. Do you have any idea what this has done to me? How many nights I've cried myself to sleep wondering what I did wrong? And all this time you were here, smiling, laughing, happy with her? People were staring now, but I didn't care. Let them watch. Let the whole world see what he had done. Ethan tried again, his voice breaking. It's not what you think. Don't you dare, I hissed. Don't you dare insult me with more lies.
The confrontation at the hotel should have brought me some kind of closure. Instead, it left me with a gaping wound I couldn't stop bleeding from. That night, I sat on Jenna's couch, numb, while she handed me tissues and hot tea. My phone buzzed nonstop. Calls, texts, voicemails, all from Ethan. I didn't answer a single one. The messages started with apologies. Please, let me explain. It wasn't what it looked like. Then they shifted to desperation. I made a mistake. You're the love of my life. Don't throw this away. By the third day, they turned into anger. So you're just going to ignore me? You owe me a chance to talk. I didn't owe him anything. But ignoring him didn't mean I wasn't breaking inside. Every memory we shared replayed in my head, tainted now, corrupted. The night he held me after my mom's funeral, whispering that I wasn't alone. The mornings he kissed me awake. The promises we made when we moved in together. Had it all been a lie? Or worse, had it been real for me but disposable for him? The apartment became unbearable. His clothes in the closet, his toothbrush in the bathroom, the scent of his cologne clinging to the pillows. It felt like living in a mausoleum of our relationship. So I packed a bag and stayed with Jenna. It wasn't long before Ethan found me. He showed up at Jenna's door one evening looking wrecked. His hair was disheveled, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept in days. Please, he begged, just give me 10 minutes. Jenna looked at me, silently asking if I wanted to deal with this. Against my better judgment, I nodded. I needed to hear what he had to say, if only to bury this once and for all. We sat across from each other at Jenna's kitchen table. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. Okay, I said, my voice colder than I felt. Talk. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Clara, it started a few months ago. I don't even know how. We were working late, we had drinks, one thing led to another. I didn't mean for it to happen, and I swear to you, it didn't mean anything. I laughed bitterly. Didn't mean anything? You booked hotel rooms. You held her hand in public. You told her things you never told me. His face crumpled. I was stupid. I felt stuck, and she was just an escape. But I love you. I never stopped loving you. The words felt hollow. If you loved me, you wouldn't have betrayed me. Not like this. Not for months. He tried again, his voice cracking. I'll do anything. Therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us. I wanted to scream. Part of me still loved him. Of course I did. You don't just turn off years of history like a switch. But love without trust is a cage, and I couldn't live like that. So I said the words I never thought I'd say. It's over, Ethan. His face went pale. He whispered, please, don't do this. But I stood firm, even as my heart shattered. You already did. He left that night, and for the first time in years, I felt both utterly broken and strangely free. The fallout was brutal. I moved out of the apartment, crashing on Jenna's couch while I searched for a place of my own. Friends took sides, some sympathetic, others whispering that maybe I should have tried harder to work through it. My dad was furious when he found out, threatening to show up at Ethan's office and teach him a lesson. Through it all, I kept moving, one agonizing step at a time. But the worst was yet to come, because betrayal doesn't end when you walk away. It lingers. It infects everything that comes after. And I was about to find out just how deep those scars could go. The weeks after leaving Ethan were a blur of survival. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office just to avoid the silence of Jenna's apartment when I got home. I scrolled through apartment listings, toured cramped studios, and cried in bathrooms when no one was looking. Ethan still tried to reach me. Emails, texts, even a handwritten letter slipped under Jenna's door. I didn't respond. I blocked him everywhere I could, but the ghost of him lingered in everything. A song on the radio, a restaurant we once loved, even a stupid inside joke that popped into my head at the worst times. What made it harder was the questions. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Why? Why did he do it? Why wasn't I enough? Why did he throw everything away? And I had no answers. One night, I finally broke and met up with Clara. It wasn't planned. I ran into her outside a grocery store, and for a moment, we just stared at each other, frozen. Then she said softly, "Can we talk?" Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat at a cafe nearby, the air between us thick with tension. She looked nervous, wringing her hands, while I sat stiff, bracing myself. "She didn't know about you," she said finally. Her eyes glistened with tears. "He told me he was single, that he'd been single for a while." I wanted to scream, to call her a liar, but the pain in her eyes was too real. She had been betrayed too. We played us both," I whispered. She nodded, tears spilling over. "When I found out about you, I ended it. I didn't want to be that person. For the first time, I saw her not as the enemy, but as another victim of his lies. We talked for hours, piecing together timelines, realizing how carefully he had juggled us, how many lies he had told to keep both lives afloat. It was devastating and oddly healing, because it wasn't about me not being enough. It was about him being a coward, chasing validation wherever he could find it. After that meeting, I felt a shift. The anger was still there, the heartbreak still raw, but the shame started to lift. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't Clara's fault. It was Ethan's choices, his lies, his betrayal. But the damage lingered. Dating again felt impossible. The thought of trusting someone new made my stomach churn. When men at work flirted, I smiled politely and excused myself. When friends tried to set me up, I shut it down before it could begin. I built walls so high no one could get close. And even though I told myself I was healing, deep down I knew I was just surviving. One night, months later, Ethan showed up again. This time at my new apartment, drunk, pounding on the door. His voice cracked as he begged me to take him back, slurring promises of change. I didn't open the door. I called Jenna, who called his brother to come get him. As I sat there listening to him sob in the hallway, I realized just how far I'd come. The woman who once begged for scraps of honesty was gone. I didn't need him anymore. But healing wasn't linear. Some nights I still cried myself to sleep. Some mornings I woke up with the phantom ache of missing him. Infidelity doesn't just break your heart. It shatters your sense of self, your ability to trust, your belief in the world you thought you knew. And rebuilding that would take far longer than I ever imagined.
It's strange how life moves on, even when you feel stuck in the past. Months blurred into a year, and though the pain dulled, it never fully disappeared. Betrayal leaves scars you can't see but feel every day. Tiny reminders that flare when you least expect them. I threw myself into routines. Work, gym, nights with Jenna, weekends with my dad. I filled my days so full, there was no room for loneliness to creep in. At least that's what I told myself. But the loneliness found cracks anyway. There were nights when I sat alone in my new apartment, scrolling through old photos, torturing myself with images of smiles that had all been lies. Sometimes I'd hover over Ethan's number, tempted to call, just to hear his voice. But then I'd remember the hotel, the email, the message on his phone, and the urge would vanish, replaced by rage. The truth was, I missed who I thought he was, not who he really was. Therapy helped. I finally broke down and started seeing someone after Jenna insisted. My therapist, a calm woman with kind eyes, helped me unpack the mess. She reminded me over and over that Ethan's cheating wasn't a reflection of my worth, that trust is a choice, and he chose to break it. Slowly, I started to believe her. Still, dating terrified me. When I finally agreed to coffee with a guy a mutual friend set me up with, I spent the entire time dissecting everything he said, searching for hidden lies. When his phone buzzed, my stomach twisted, convinced he was texting another woman. He was sweet, patient, but after 2 dates, I ended it. I wasn't ready. Trust had become foreign, dangerous. The biggest twist came months later, when Clara reached out again. She sent me a message on Facebook. "I thought you should know, he tried to contact me again."
My blood ran cold. She explained that Ethan had shown up at her work begging for another chance, spinning new promises about how he had changed. She told him no, of course, but she thought I deserved to know. Reading her message, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not because I wanted him back, but because it confirmed everything my therapist had been drilling into me. His behavior wasn't about me, or Clara, or any woman. It was about him, his emptiness, his need for validation, his inability to stay faithful. For the first time, I felt pity instead of heartbreak. He was chasing something he'd never catch because the problem wasn't the women he betrayed. It was the man he was when no one was watching. That realization was a turning point. I stopped checking his social media, stopped wondering if he was happy with someone new, stopped giving him space in my mind. But healing doesn't erase the past. It just teaches you how to carry it. And some days the weight still felt unbearable. I remember one evening sitting with my dad on his porch. He poured us both a drink and said, "You know, your mom always used to say, heartbreak shows you who you really are. And from where I'm sitting, you're stronger than you've ever been." I cried that night, not of grief, but out of something like hope. Because maybe he was right. Maybe the scars would always be there. But maybe they didn't have to define me. The question was, what would I do with them?
By the second year after the breakup, I finally started to feel like myself again, or maybe a new version of myself. Stronger, more cautious, but also strangely freer. I no longer woke up with Ethan's face in my mind or cried myself to sleep over memories. Instead, I focused on building a life that was entirely mine. I got a promotion at work, something I might have missed out on if I'd still been tangled in the chaos of his lies. I decorated my apartment exactly the way I wanted. Bright colors, plants everywhere, mismatched mugs that made me smile. I took solo trips, something I'd always been too scared to do before. Each new experience felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't even realized I'd lost. But healing isn't linear. Trust still came hard. When I started seeing someone new, Ryan, a kind, funny guy from a friend's game night, I found myself holding back. He'd leave his phone on the table, wide open, and instead of being reassured, I'd tense up, waiting for it to buzz with someone else's name. He noticed, of course. One night after I flinched when his phone rang, he gently asked, "Did someone hurt you?" The lump in my throat was immediate. I wanted to deflect, to joke it away, but instead, I told him the truth. About Ethan, about Clara, about how I still felt like betrayal was a shadow I couldn't outrun. Ryan didn't interrupt, didn't judge. He just listened, holding my hand the whole time. When I finished, he said, "I'm not him, and I don't expect you to trust me overnight, but I'll be here however long it takes." His words didn't magically fix me, but they planted something, a seed of hope that maybe trust could grow again, if slowly, if nurtured with patience. Still, Ethan wasn't completely out of my life. Occasionally, I'd hear about him through mutual friends. Once I learned that he had moved to another city. Another time, someone mentioned he was already in another relationship. Each piece of news brought a pang, but less each time, like echoes fading. The biggest test came unexpectedly. One afternoon, I was leaving a bookstore when I saw him across the street, Ethan. He looked almost the same, though maybe a little older, a little more worn. Our eyes met, and for a split second, the world seemed to freeze. He started to cross toward me, but I turned and walked away. Not out of fear, not even out of anger, but because I didn't owe him a single second more of my life. That night, I realized something profound. I had finally moved on, not because I had forgotten, but because I had accepted. He was part of my past, but he no longer controlled my present. The scars were still there, yes, but they no longer defined me. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. Looking back now, I sometimes wonder if there was a moment when things could have gone differently. If I had confronted Ethan sooner, if I had trusted my gut instead of clinging to denial. But the truth is, betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed. No amount of vigilance or love could have stopped what he chose to do. The hardest lesson was realizing that love, by itself, isn't enough. You can love someone with every piece of your heart, but if they don't respect that love, if they don't protect it with honesty, it means nothing. Ethan loved me, in his way. I don't doubt that. But his love was weak, conditional, selfish. And in the end, that wasn't the kind of love I deserved. Healing wasn't about getting over it. It was about rebuilding myself from the wreckage, about learning that my worth isn't tied to someone else's loyalty, about realizing that betrayal may break you, but it doesn't have to define you. For a long time, I carried shame,
like his cheating was a reflection of me not being enough. But I know better now. I was enough. I was loyal, loving, present. His infidelity wasn't a commentary on my value, it was an indictment of his character. There are still scars. I won't lie about that. Sometimes when Ryan hugs me, a part of me tenses, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Sometimes when I hear a phone buzz late at night, my chest tightens. But the difference now is I don't let those fears control me. I acknowledge them, breathe through them, and remind myself that I'm not living in that nightmare anymore. I've learned that trust isn't about blind faith. It's about choosing to risk vulnerability, even knowing it may hurt. And I've learned that if someone shows you they can't be trusted, the bravest thing you can do is walk away. Would I wish this experience on anyone? No. It broke me in ways I never thought I could survive, but I did survive. And I came out stronger, sharper, more aware of what I will and won't accept in my life. If I could go back and talk to the woman I was, the one sitting in her car watching Ethan kiss Clara's hand, sobbing and shaking, I would tell her this: you're going to make it. It's going to hurt like hell, but one day you'll look back and realize his betrayal was the beginning of your freedom, not the end of your story. Because here's the truth. Betrayal may steal your past, but it doesn't get to steal your future. And my future, my life, is mine again.
Another story ends, but there are always more. Subscribe and stay tuned.